Thanks, Chair, and very happy to let Mr Freund go before me, particularly because I agree with all of the points that he made. I suppose from our point of view and the way the left sees this report is supposed to be principally a response to the Cattergate scandal, and in that sense we'd hope to work very cooperatively and maybe with less scale of differences than we would normally have in this body, but I'm not sure that that's the document that we have in front of us. Make a few points on that. I mean, what was wrong with the Cattergate scandal wasn't that it was a foreign country that was corrupting the European parliamentarians or staff, it was that it was corruption. That was the problem. It wouldn't have been any less of a crime or any less of an affront to democracy if it had been a member state that was corrupting MEPs with bags of cash. We think as well that the idea is confusing if we pretend that this is a democracy versus authoritarian issue. I mean, clearly Qatar is an autocratic regime. I don't think we disagree with that, but I don't think that European citizens would be any less comfortable with the fact if we were being corrupted by a democracy. Corruption is corruption. And that was the issue really that this report was supposed to address. So I think by kind of going down the silo of sort of high risks and that misses that approach or downsizes it a bit too much, because if we'd had a high risk approach, I don't think actually Morocco or Qatar would necessarily have come on it, because the way this committee operates, if you're outside of Russia, China or Iran, you probably wouldn't have got on that list anyway. So I don't think that's what this was supposed to be, because really what this mandate, INC 3 or whatever we'll call it, this was about ethics in the European Parliament, and that's the addition to this mandate in the wake of Cattergate, was strengthening the integrity, transparency and accountability of the European Parliament. That's what we're supposed to be doing. So we were given the responsibility of making recommendations to the working group on the reform of the Parliament's rules. We all know that the scandal was a blow to the Parliament, and how we respond is going to be analysed. But we see this report and the draft as being a little bit of a mission creep, that the focus on corruption and ethics is being watered down and is being refocused away from Qatar towards the traditional obsessions of the committee, China and Russia and so on. So we're going away from the Cattergate scandal itself, away from reforms aimed strictly at increasing transparency, integrity and accountability, and more, if you like, towards a security culture reform, protections against espionage and all those other good stuff, which may have a place, but that place is much more in the INC 2 report. It's not actually supposed to be in this one. But that said, we do obviously agree that there are some very positive suggestions in the report that do address the corruption scandal. Many of them we can agree with, about the conduct and the need for MEPs to be transparent in their activities. Many of them are good stuff, but the emphasis is a little bit off here and it gives the wrong message. I mean, if you look at the first paragraph, it's talking about offloading the responsibility on individual MEPs. I mean, fair enough, that is why we got into the trouble with Cattergate, but we're supposed to be reforming the rules against that. So I don't think that's a good way to start. So look at what we'll be doing in our amendments, and as I say, we can agree with a lot of the direct measures, but is focusing on expanding and improving the recommendations in the areas of ethics and monitoring, enforcement. And as I say, I agreed with all the points made by Daniel Freund. We too would have strong concerns about the areas of NGOs and CSOs. Transparency in these areas is important. We accept that, but we'd be very concerned about using this as an excuse to crack down on NGOs or limiting the ability of civil society to influence the Parliament. That is their job, and they're entitled to do that in a democracy. We also think there's a glaring omission here in relation to no mention at all of think tanks, which infest this place like a plague. And if NGOs are going to be subject to increased rules, well, why would we exempt think tanks from this? I mean, the way political groups generally bring in these experts from supposedly neutral organisations which are bankrolled by governments or the arms industry or other interest groups and are patently not neutral, surely then the same rules should apply to them. It's a biased expertise which must be highlighted. I think there's other areas we've been looking into. Other colleagues mentioned it. We'd be deeply concerned at the singling out of Russian citizens. There are 6 million Russians living in Europe. The fact that that's their nationality doesn't put a big badge over their head. That's disgraceful, actually. To single them out would be very, very dangerous. Saying, oh, that they have to have a link with the government as well. Well, who establishes that is very vague. So we'd be worried about that inherently racist measure. And again, like the colleague from the ECR said, measures that limit the ability of parliamentarians to carry out their parliamentary activity need to be carefully watched as well. So the idea of people having to be silenced or censored, that they can't express an opinion on an official mission, that you have to be bound by the party line, and all of this kind of thing is corralling us into a single political opinion which doesn't exist in reality. We're not a technocratic institution. We're a parliament made up of different views. We're all elected here and we represent those views, and there has to be a forum for those views to be aired. That obviously is completely different than somebody pretending that they represent the parliament. But an elected parliamentarian going somewhere or having a political opinion of their own is entirely their right. That's what we're supposed to be doing. So we'd be very careful about some of the amendments on that are a little bit scary. And as I say, things like including staff and APAs who have access to restricted files, that they'd be subject to politically exposed persons for anti-money laundering. I mean, come on, our staff here don't have, a choice in what files they become that they work on. It seems utterly sort of authoritarian now, a lot of these measures. So I think we have to be a bit careful. And I suppose the conclusion for us is we're much more interested in dealing with the ethics and what this report was actually supposed to be, rather than creeping off into the other areas where we normally kind of go on this stuff. But that said, there are quite a few measures we can agree with as well.
Thank you.